The second Bitcoin strategic reserve was just announced this week. But who was it? Was it one of these countries that has been considering a Bitcoin strategic reserve out of the 25 that have announced it? Or has it been one of the announcements of announcements that Dennis Porter has famously come out for, another small United States state to come out and create a Bitcoin strategic reserve? Or is it a player that has been in Bitcoin and quietly stacking in the background for quite some time? Well, it seems like that has been the case because a very, very small country has been quietly turning in to a Bitcoin superpower, potentially a Bitcoin giant, after following the playbook that El Salvador has been lining out. El Salvador has even been buying more and more Bitcoin every single day. El Salvador has even, over the past few days, been buying 11 Bitcoin a day, nearly 10xing the amount of Bitcoin they've been buying recently. Now, what is this small country? Of course, we're talking about the Kingdom of Bhutan, but it's interesting because it's not exactly the full Kingdom of Bhutan that is developing this strategic reserve. It's an economic zone in the Himalayas called I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, the Gelephu Mindfulness City, also known as the GMC. I'm going to be referring it to that as that the rest of the time on this live stream, folks, or at least the Mindfulness City. But they're using assets like Bitcoin and then, of course, BNB and Ethereum into its strategic reserve. But what is interesting about this city is that it's controlled by the king of the Kingdom of Bhutan, and every economic policy goes through this king. And this whole economic zone was created by the king, right? So Bhutan has had its fair share of bullish Bitcoin news here, and it's been one of the leaders in the Bitcoin space for quite some time. They've even started mining Bitcoin as well, and we'll get into all of that here later. But look at this country seemingly going all in on Bitcoin and creating a strategic reserve. So the Mindfulness City near Gelephu is a newly established special administrative region that will serve as the country's economic hub. I think that is extremely important because not only is it going to be a tourist attraction to try to increase the amount of tourism. I mean, we've seen this be very successful for El Salvador already, right? We've seen El Salvador go from the most dangerous country in the world to now a country that is increasing tourism every single year. People are rapidly going to El Salvador and trying to travel there and experience the changes that everything has occurred in El Salvador. So, and that's part of the reason is because of Bukele, but part of the reason is because of Bitcoin. So others are taking note as to seeing the development and the growth there from Bukele and there from El Salvador. But let's keep diving in onto what this means, right? So the Kingdom of Bhutan and its Bitcoin strategy has been one of the first countries to see the potential of Bitcoin. And it's a small Asian kingdom in the Himalayas that started mining Bitcoin back in 2019. That's 5 years ago, folks. Bhutan has been bullish on Bitcoin for over 5 years. They started mining Bitcoin and they saw Bitcoin crash from 12,000 to under 4,000 and then rise all the way up to 69,000 and then also see it crash down back to 17 again. And then now they're seeing it run up past 100K. They're still extremely bullish on Bitcoin. So I think this is a very promising strategy that we're seeing coming out of the Kingdom of Bhutan as another even though it's a smaller country, start to develop it. So now this is a very interesting depiction here. And so let's pull that up as the royal government's Kingdom of Bhutan's crypto holding, right? But let's highlight Bitcoin here because they have 11 point nearly 7 Bitcoin valued at over $1.1 billion there, right? So they've got a little bit of ETH as well, but comparatively, they seem to be all in on Bitcoin and what that means for the growing economy of Kingdom of Bhutan. So, and quite frankly, other major players in the Bitcoin space are taking notice. Even Michael Saylor, the Giga Chad himself, is looking at things like this and saying, okay, look, the Bhutan pioneers adopting the Bitcoin strategy and strategic reserve. He's tweeting it out. And look at Michael Saylor, right? I mean, he's got 3.9 million followers. I mean, how many people you think out of Michael Saylor's following had heard of the Kingdom of Bhutan prior to this? I'll tell you this, I didn't even know where the Kingdom of Bhutan was on a map prior to this. And it seems like their Bitcoin push is really turning heads of major players in this space. Because, this economic zone created by the king of the Kingdom of Bhutan, holding Bitcoin is now going to be the second country that is going to be creating this Bitcoin strategic reserve. Obviously, like I said previously, we've got El Salvador having that, right? And then we've seen massive amounts of success of El Salvador, and we've seen El Salvador continue to increase that holding with their Bitcoin strategic reserve, even buying more than 11 Bitcoin a day here in the recent months. I mean, I think that this is, extremely bullish for everything going forward. We see a lot of countries now start to look at what is going on in the Bitcoin space and really keeping track of what's going on in other nation states and other countries, right? So, it's known for its, this gross national happiness metric, right? So I think that this is kind of interesting here where, we've got a Southeast Asian country that, looks at things not only from an economic perspective, but on their population side of things as well, right? I mean, we've had Nayib Bukele really try to focus on the people, see how the money can drastically affect the people there, right? I mean, we've had a ton of gang-related issues now in El Salvador previously, and that's all changed. And so we've now have El Salvador continuing to look at as a potential tourist destination, and everything along those lines continuing to improve. And so it looks like the Kingdom of Bhutan is in a similar space, and part of that is building a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And they're going to run this experiment in their Mindfulness city. And it's a newly established special administrative region that will hold Bitcoin and digital assets as a part of their strategic reserve. So, they're looking at all this economic data, seeing how it's building on its existing Bitcoin mining operations, which initiated in 2017 when it was valued at under $5,000. So that's how bullish Bhutan has been this entire time, is they've seen Bitcoin seemingly go from 5,000 to 100K, 108K actually, if we're looking at the true top. And they've continued to mine, continued to build out that strategic reserve. So they're definitely one of the most, if not the most bullish relative to its size, right? Because if you look at the Kingdom of Bhutan's GDP, it's tiny but mighty here at $2.9 billion, where it's, similar to El Salvador. It's a very small country. It has the ability to take this risk of initially taking a Bitcoin strategic reserve, running an experiment, and seeing how it goes. And they wouldn't have done this publicly if it wasn't for Celsius Network Celsius Network going bankrupt. I don't know if you guys recall this previously, but Celsius Network was holding the keys for the Kingdom of Bhutan previously. Then when they went bankrupt, they had to announce who was holding Bitcoin with them. So I think that, they could have been secretly stacking Bitcoin in the background for a little bit longer, but that's a little tinfoil hat theory for you guys because of this tiny but mighty economic growing giant is how I like to word this, because we're seeing such massive amounts of notice and eyeballs being towards the Kingdom of Bhutan because of what they've been doing since 2017, right? I mean, the results, quite frankly, speak for themselves. We've seen them mining Bitcoin since 2017. They're setting up this economic hub to really just go all in, right? And it's very, very bullish here going forward. And I think the interesting part of this, and we'll see how it plays out, is not only is this a Bitcoin strategic reserve, but they're also trying to diversify into other crypto. Now, I, for one, am a Bitcoin only guy. I think that this should be the way. Bitcoin only. Don't dabble in any of these altcoins, these shit coins, because we've seen them all blow up. They become super centralized. They're dinos decentralized in name only. We've got BNB, the Binance CEO has been arrested, or, Binance hasn't been allowed to operate within the United States. So there is some sketchiness and some worry that I have with all of this, because I do think that there is some issues with the Kingdom of Bhutan. I'm not fully saying, hey, Kingdom of Bhutan is going to be the next El Salvador, because it seems like the king of the Kingdom of Bhutan is not as much of a Bitcoin maxi as Nayib Bukele. But on the flip side of things, it is a start, right? You have to start somewhere. So we look like we've got the GNH. That's a new metric for me here from All Night Heater in the chat. I believe it, but he said, I bet the USA's GNH is pretty low. Yeah, I mean, I agree. The global national, or what is it? The national happiness, gross national happiness, excuse me. So, I think that these kind of aspects are going to be something that's going to improve over time, especially if we develop a Bitcoin strategic reserve, just simply because it'll help the inflationary aspects of the dollar that we're in. But let's get back to where we were, where we're seeing the Kingdom of Bhutan. We got my friend Luke Mikic. He's always sending me, hey, look at this tweet, look at that tweet. But he definitely lines this one out very well, where he's showing that the government holds $1,000 worth of Bitcoin per person. Per person. The next is El Salvador with about $55 of Bitcoin per capita. The next, United States, which is about $37 per capita. But see, this is an interesting aspect, because I went over in a video yesterday where the United States is now the largest holder currently with just under $200,000 worth of Bitcoin. But they've approved the sale of over $69,000 worth of Bitcoin, where they got it at $300 a pop. Absolutely insane to me why they would want to sell that and try to get out now. But hey, fishy timing with that too. But the US might not be the largest Bitcoin holder, and this number could change here pretty quickly. China, we've got it at $8.3 per of Bitcoin per person, and then the list goes on. But the Kingdom of Bhutan is really going all in because of how tiny but mighty their Bitcoin holding is relative to everything, right? I mean, I showed you guys this earlier. The GDP of the Kingdom of Bhutan, very, very small, but the amount of Bitcoin they're holding per person, excuse me, wrong tab here, very, very high and bullish. So you're going to see the Kingdom of Bhutan start to rise, and I believe that they're going to get, the Kingdom of Bhutan and El Salvador. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on their GDP to see where it goes from there, because they've been using Bitcoin mining to improve their overall country, improve things that are, going there. And, they've got 78,000 or 782,000 100,000, people, but they've got the most Bitcoin per person. And quite frankly, it's not even close, folks. So I think that that it's interesting that they hold over 1 billion in Bitcoin. 100% of their Bitcoin mining is green energy. So take with that what you will. But I think that this is, going to continue to rise, and their bullish approach on Bitcoin is taking notice for a lot of people going forward, right? They're funding a 50% pay raise for public servants with Bitcoin mining revenue. Now, that's going to draw a lot more talent here going forward because, hey, look at it, folks. If you're going to see a 50% increase in your salary, wouldn't you consider going to an economic zone like the Kingdom of Bhutan? Hey, man, I think I would as well. I definitely think that there's going to be a lot of things here going forward, right? But as John in the chat is saying, XRP, I am a Bitcoin only guy. I don't think that this is the way, John. And there's plenty of reasons why. And, we're not talking about a XRP strategic reserve here. We're talking about a Bitcoin strategic reserve that's being developed. So, I think it's definitely, going through. It's definitely going through and going to continue rising here, where the development of Bitcoin, once we see, Bitcoin's price start to rise. I mean, we're sitting here a little bit low, folks. We've crashed till 94,000. But that's somewhat on the news of the United States trying to sell off some of these Silk Road Bitcoin, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. And, I had a live stream on that the other day. But, I think the true power of Bitcoin, folks, is not only, holding it in Bitcoin strategic reserves and mining it properly, going through with all those different aspects, but it's truly holding your own keys, which, it would be very difficult to justify a lot of these big players to do that. But on a personal level, you can definitely do that, and very easily. It might seem like a daunting task, and that's why I've partnered with my friends over at the Bitcoin Way. You can go to the bitcoinway.com/green candle, and you could book a free 30-minute consultation where they could do a multitude of other things. I'm sitting here in Colombia. If I wanted to get a Plan B passport because, I don't know, something just to back up here potentially, right? I mean, you want to always protect yourself. If I wanted to do that, I could go to the Bitcoin Way. If I wanted to get my Bitcoin off an exchange, check the cybersecurity on my computer. They've got over 20 years of experience. I don't want anybody hacking my Bitcoin, taking my seed phrase from me. So I trust the Bitcoin Way with everything they've got going on as well. As All Night Heater says in the chat here, Bitcoin checks all the boxes, and that is 100% true here, folks. I mean, look at all of these countries here with a Bitcoin holding, right? It's the United States, it's China, it's the UK, the Kingdom of Bhutan, El Salvador, all of these countries, a lot of companies as well. I have another live stream that I'm doing here later today about the potential of more companies starting to develop a Bitcoin strategic reserve. There's a reason why these companies and these countries are doing Bitcoin only or majority Bitcoin. And that's because it's one of the trusted ones in this space. And it's pronounced Hider. Excuse me here, All Night Hider. I'll get that right for the next time. I mean, you're a dedicated man to the chat, so I always appreciate you coming in. But like I said, folks, the next closest is El Salvador with 55. Bhutan having $1,000 worth of Bitcoin per person that they have in their country is extremely bullish. I think going forward, we're going to see a lot more countries start to develop a plan similar to what we've seen in the Kingdom of Bhutan. And it's only a matter of time, folks. So buckle up. I think, we're going to see an extremely bullish 2025. If you're here, or if it's your first time here, I appreciate you guys coming in. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, tell a friend to tell a friend. And I will see you guys all later on today, where I've got another one scheduled at 4:30. So be sure to join me at that one, where we're going to talk about the potential of Meta putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet.